It's now time to move forward and learn about the cycle of how our bodies react, act, and interact during sexual activities. It's important to know how our body responds during a sexual activity to establish a healthy boundary and enhance our relationship and connection with our partner or even with just ourselves. In this way, you can also decipher any abnormalities or dysfunction and what does not please you in experiencing sexual intercourse. According to Roland and Gutierrez 2017, the human sexual response cycles revolves around the sequence of phases that a body experiences by physical and emotional triggers during sexual stimulation. It is also important to note that these phases may vary depending on your body. You may or may not experience some of these or may not be in the corresponding sequence. And it is totally okay and normal because our bodies differ from others.
People often have a misconception about the phases they experience when they start having sexual intercourse with other people. They say they were aroused when in reality they are experiencing the phase of desire, the phase 1, where the person's sex drive or libido is triggered, which can last from a few minutes to several hours depending on the situation or the mood of the people involved in the intercourse. They may start feeling an increase of their muscle tension, their heartbeat and breathing accelerated, their skin may start to become flushed, especially on their chest and back. Their nipples begin to feel numb and harden. The blood flow to their genitals increases, resulting in swelling of the woman's clitoris and labia minora or inner lips, and erection of the man's penis. Vaginal lubrication begins for the woman, and his vaginal walls begin to swell and their breasts become fuller. While the man's testicles swell, his scrotum tightens and he begins secreting a lubricating liquid much the same as the woman. After these characteristics appear during the intercourse, the real arousal phase is just following.
Phase 2 is the arousal. Arousal is the second phase of the sexual response cycle. It marks the escalation of the changes initiated in the preceding phase. It serves as a bridge between desire and fulfillment, engendering a series of transformation and the set stage for ultimate climax. In this phase, individuals traverse a path where body and mind align a symphony of sensations. Body transformation and sensations. Arousal is characterized by intensified changes that mirror the surge of excitement within. For women, these changes manifest in the form of vaginal alterations. Increased blood flow causes the vaginal walls to swell and adopt a deep purple hue, amplifying sensitivity and signifying the impending peak. The clitoris, a nexus of pleasure, becomes highly sensitive and retracts under its protective hood to evade direct stimulation. In men, the testicles undergo a distinctive movement, retracting upward into the scrotum. Psychological reactions match an increased sensation of the body moves through the arousal phase. Blood pressure increases, breathing becomes deeper, and heartbeat quickens. These responses mirror the body's readiness for the impending climax, as the tempo of physiological changes corresponds with the intensification of pleasure. Muscle spasms and tension. The beginning of muscular spasms is one of the distinguishing features of arousal phase. Usually, these spasms start in the feet or other extremities and eventually spread to the face and hands. These tremors, intertwined with the growing tension in muscles, contribute to the overall physical experience of arousal, enhancing the overall sense of anticipation and readiness. The narrative of arousal. At its core, the arousal phase magnifies the initial sparks of attraction, translating them into a vivid narrative of heightened sensations and building desire. This journey mirrors the progression from the realm of longing to the brink of ultimate pleasure. The orchestration of these changes, both physiological and emotional, illustrates the intricate balance required for the body to respond harmoniously to intimacy.
After experiencing the desire and arousal, our body will start to feel pleasure that will lead to the peak of sexual response cycle, which is the orgasm. The orgasm is the third phase of this cycle. In this cycle, the body is in a state of release, meaning it's already ready to release all tension that is acquired during the intercourse. It is the shortest phase of the cycle that only lasts for a few seconds. In this phase, the body is experiencing symptoms such as heavy breathing that causes rapid intake of oxygen, and involuntary muscle movement or contractions occur, as well as muscle in the feet spasm, increase in blood pressure, and the heart rate are also present. After experiencing these symptoms, a sudden forceful release of sexual tension happens when the peak is reached. When this happens, women experience rhythmic contraction in their vagina, while men feel these rhythmic contractions in their penis, which results in ejaculation. Upon experiencing orgasm, a sex splash or a rash may appear to the entire body.
The last phase is called the resolution, wherein our bodies gradually return to the pre-arousal or pre-orgasm state. Particularly, our bodies are sensing a rest due to fatigue and heartbeats, muscle tension, and blood pressure return to their normal state. Depending on how each body works, normally, men's bodies go through refractory periods, a period where they do not react to any sexual stimulation anymore and might take time for recovery. While women's body are relatively still capable for further stimulation and orgasm afterwards. Note that refractory periods can still vary depending on a person's age and the intimacy or experience between partners. Nevertheless, the bottom line of this cycle is that a person feels satisfied. From there, let us now talk about the terminology that concerns with the gender identity and sexual orientation to be foretold by Miss Bernardino.
As we grow older, we question a lot of things, not just what's happening in our society, but also we start asking about the sense of self that concerns our identity. We start to want to know what we should be called as or labeled as. So here, we will be tackling many terms that is used nowadays. Let's start with questioning. It is the place where a person is exploring their gender identity or sexual orientation. As we discover these things, we come to realization that there are different views regarding a person's gender identity and sexual orientation. We discover that there are many spectrums in which someone's sexuality can be perceived. The most common gender identity is what we call cisgender, which is the person whose sense of identity and gender matches their sex assigned at birth. They are identified as heterosexual or straight, which is defined as a person who is attracted physically and emotionally to someone of the opposite sex or gender. Now, in this generation, you can now be both or neither. Now, we will introduce the LGBTQIA+ community. A common misconception about this community is that they were composed of just gays or lesbians people. But they are more than that, literally more. The community is open to all gender identity. It is called LGBTQ2S+, LGBTQ*, LGBTQ+, GLBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ2, LGBTQIA. It is an acronym that refers to the collection of sexual and gender identities including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual. The asterisk or plus sign shows that there are other identities including that aren't in the acronym. These acronyms means that the same as sexual and gender minorities. There is another acronym that goes by this definition, as well as that highlights three important traits that are part of every person's identity, which is called SOGI. SOGI is an acronym that stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. To further discuss the different sexual and gender identities that were included in this community, let's start by knowing what are the people that we identified as gays and lesbians, as they were more commonly known in the society. A person who is physically and emotionally attracted to someone of the same sex or gender is considered gay. While it refers to both male and females, it usually used for a male who is attracted to males, while a female who is attracted physically and emotionally to other females are called lesbians. Aside from being identified as gay and lesbian, there are people that were also part of this community. A person who is attracted physically and emotionally to both males and females is called bisexual. Sometimes they were considered to have two-spirit, which is a cultural term used by some indigenous people to mean a person has both a male and female spirit. It may include concepts of spirituality, sexual orientation, and gender identity. While a person who doesn't feel sexual attraction may or may not feel emotional or romantic attraction is called asexual. Next is the transgender people, who self-identify gender identity, how they look and express themselves, and or their anatomy doesn't fit into the sex assigned at birth. Through transition, a transgender becomes a transsexual. Transition is undergoing medical or surgical intervention, which is a process of change from biological sex to one self-identified gender. This may include physical, legal, and social changes. This transition is also called gender confirming surgery or GCS, where many transgender people prefer this term to the older term sex reassignment surgery. Sometimes, this surgery is only a small part of the transition or expression of gender. Many transgender people don't have surgery for all kinds of reasons. It's inappropriate to ask a transgender person about what surgical or medical procedures they are planning or have undergone, so be sensitive and mindful. Some people are considered to be queer, a reclaimed term used by some people who identify as a sexual minority. It's also used as a positive collective term to describe communities and social movements, not to be confused with genderqueer, whose people will identify their gender to be neither male nor female, but outside the gender binary. Gender binary is the classification of sex and gender into two distinct and separate states of masculine and feminine. It is a social boundary that discourages people from crossing or mixing gender roles. There is also what we call gender variant, whose expressions of gender don't conform to the more commonly accepted gender norms are masculinity and femininity. Furthermore, as we view one's self-identity and be part of it, there are some cases where a person can be identified as being part of one when they were born. It is a condition in which a person is born with a reproductive or sex organ that doesn't seem to fit the usual anatomy of female or male, and it is called as intersex. Inclusive language is used in these types of gender identities, though it is not just limited to people that are intersex. It can be also used as sexual, bisexual, or people that are considered to be gender neutral. It's a language that's not specific to gender like they, or them, or terms that are non-gendered, singular or plural personal pronouns. For examples are partner instead of boyfriend or girlfriend, parent instead of mom or dad, the pronoun they instead of he or she. Knowing all these different gender identities, we start to have enlightened about our sexual orientation and come out in which a person tells people about one's sexual orientation or gender identity, or also known as coming out of the closet. To gain more freedom about gender expression and to be accepted to the society we're living in with the help of an ally, which is a person who promotes and supports the human, civil, and sexual rights of sexual and gender minorities, and GSA, QSA, or Gay Straight or Queer Straight Alliance, which are student groups found in some K-12 schools, where these groups create supportive and safe environments for sexual and gender minorities and their supporters. On the contrary, not all people accept this kind of community. Some people are part of an ideology called heterosexism. These are people who discriminate based on the belief that all people are heterosexual and cisgender. They use heteronormative language on everybody that is not heterosexual or cisgender. Heteronormative language is using the terms boyfriend or girlfriend instead of partner, or use mother and father instead of a parent. They believe that being straight means that they have superior sexual orientation and gender identity. Its offension in subtle ways like homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia, defining this phobia as the fear and or hatred of people who are gay, bisexual, or transgender. That is offension through prejudice, discrimination, intimidation, or acts of violence. Sometimes these people use the term homosexual, which is an outdated and offensive term for a person who has an emotional and/or sexual attraction to people of the same sex, to attack a person's sexual orientation and the person itself. Or they also do outing or making someone else's sexual orientation or gender identity public without the person's permission or knowledge. This can be harmful to a child or teen if they come from a non-supportive home environment, resulting in them experiencing internalized homophobia, which is when a person feels they're less than as a result of the experience or presumed homophobia of others. Being aware of these things can make us more knowledgeable in respecting someone's gender identity and sexual orientation. So always know to yourself and be sensitive in talking about certain things about a person, whether it is about their sexual or their personal, that they tell you. Throughout the history of the Philippines, topics such as mental and sexual health is a taboo as we are a Christian nation. It is viewed as unethical, shameful, and out of the ordinary to speak of. Even in the contemporary world, it is still remained as a sensitive subject, in which most of the time is avoided by many. This phenomenon greatly affects the health status of many Filipinos. Because of the lack of knowledge on sexual wellness, an increased risk of sexually transmitted diseases and infections are still present up to this day. Not to mention the sexual abuses and teenage pregnancies that result in unwanted children that are relevant and widespread throughout the country.
Being open and inclusive in sex-related topics does not necessarily mean that you are sexually driven, nor eager for sexual activities. As a matter of fact, it helps people to understand the demands and rights of their body, in which will give them knowledge when their body is subjected to harmful sexual acts. Through learning about sexual health, we will learn when to say no, establish consent, and govern our very own sexuality. Nourishing these concepts into practicality will promote a healthy environment, awareness, and mindset around one's sexual health. Hence, implementing the appropriate sexual education does not really urge curiosity to engage with it, but rather widens our knowledge over our own bodies and desires.
Regardless of who we are, where we are coming from, and what we prefer and desire, it is important to practice safety in sex. Do not be discouraged. Do not be ashamed. Discover yourself, know yourself, and understand yourself. Asking questions and being sexually active does not make us less of a person.
So now let us create a healthy and positive environment. The change starts now with us. And with that said, we are now ending this presentation. Thank you for your time.
Let us break the stigma.